Vidkun was a Norwegian military officer, politician, and Nazi collaborator who nominally headed the government of Norway during the country's occupation by Nazi Germany during the World War II. He first came to international prominence as a close collaborator of the explorer Fridtjof Nansen and through organizing humanitarian relief during the Russian famine of 1921 in Povolzhye. He was posted as a Norwegian diplomat to the Soviet Union and for some time also managed British diplomatic affairs there. He returned to Norway in 1929 and served as Minister of Defense in the governments of Peder Kolstad and Jens Anseid in representing the Farmers' Party. In 1933, Quisling left the Farmers' Party and founded the fascist National Samling national gathering, although he gained some popularity after his attacks on the political left. His party failed to win any seats in the Storting, and by 1940 it was still little more than peripheral. On 9 April 1940, with the German invasion of Norway in progress, he attempted to seize power in the world's first radio broadcast coup d'etat but failed, since the Germans sought to convince the recognized Norwegian government to legitimize the German occupation, as had been done in Denmark during the simultaneous invasion there. Instead of recognizing Quisling, on 1st February 1942, he formed a second government approved by the Germans and served as minister, president, and headed the Norwegian state administration jointly with the German civilian administrator Joseph de Boven. His pro-Nazi puppet government, known as the Quisling regime, was dominated by ministers from National Samling. The collaborationist government participated in Germany's war efforts and sent Jews out of the country to concentration camps in occupied Poland. General government. Quisling was put on trial during the legal purge in Norway after World War II. He was found guilty of charges including embezzlement, murder, and high treason against the Norwegian state, and was sentenced to death. He was executed by firing squad at Acacia's fortress Oslo on 24 October 1945. Since his death, Quisling has become one of history's most infamous traitors due to his collaboration with Nazi Germany. The term Quisling had become a byword for collaborator or traitor in several languages and reflects the contempt with which Quisling's conduct has been regarded both at the time and in the present day. Quisling Abraham Lauritz Johnson Quisling was born on 18 July 1887 in Fresdal in the Norwegian county of Telemark. He was the son of Church of Norway pastor and genealogy John Lauritz Quisling, who was born in 1844 and died in 1930, and his wife Anna Caroline Bang, who was born in 1860 and died in 1941. Daughter of Jørgen Bang, ship owner and at the time the richest man in the town of Grimstad in South Norway. The elder Quisling had lectured in Grimstad in 1870s. One of his people was Bang, whom he married on 28 May 1886. Following a long engagement, the newly wedded couple promptly moved to Fresdal, where Vidkun and his younger siblings were born. In September 1919, Quisling departed Norway to become an intelligence officer with the Norwegian delegation in Helsinki, a post that combined diplomacy and politics. In the autumn of 1921, Quisling left Norway once again, this time at the request of explorer and humanitarian Fridtjof Nansen, and in January 1922 arrived in Ukrainian capital in Kharkiv to help with the League of Nations humanitarian relief effort there, highlighting the massive mismanagement of the area and the death toll of approximately 10,000 a day. Quisling produced a report that attracted aid and demonstrated his administrative skills as well as his dogged determination to get what he wanted. In June 1925, Nansen once again provided Quisling with deployment. The pair began a tour of Armenia where they hoped to help repatriate Armenians, including those who survived the Armenian genocide, via a number of projects proposed for funding by the League of Nations. Despite Quisling's substantial efforts, however, the projects were all rejected. In May 1926, Quisling found another job with a long-time friend and fellow Norwegian, Fredrik Pritz, in Moscow, working as a liaison between Pritz and the Soviet authorities who owned half of Pritz's farm on Negerwood. He stayed in the job until Pritz prepared to close down the business in early 1927. When Quisling found a new employment as a diplomat, British diplomatic affairs in Russia were being managed by Norway, and he became their new legation secretary. Maria joined him late in 1928. A massive scandal broke when Quisling and Pritz were accused of using diplomatic channels to smuggle millions of rubles onto the black markets, a much repeated claim that was later used to support a charge of moral bankruptcy, but neither it nor the charge that Quisling spied for the British has ever been substantiated. Having spent 9 of the previous 12 years abroad, but with no practical experience in party politics outside the Norwegian army, Quisling returned to Norway in December 1929, bringing with him a plan for change he termed Norsk Action, meaning Norwegian Action. The planned organization consisted of national, regional, and local units with the intention of recruiting in the style of the Soviet Communist Party. Like Action for the Science of the French Right, it advocated radical constitutional changes. The Parliament of Norway or Stoting, was to become bicameral with a second chamber made up of Soviet-style elected representatives from the working population. Quisling focused more on organization than the practicalities of government. For instance, all members of Norsk Action were to have their own designation in a militaristic hierarchy. Quisling left Nordisk Norge in May 1931 to serve as defense minister in the agrarian government of Peter Kolstad. Despite being neither an agrarian nor a friend of Kolstad, he had been suggested for Kolstad for the post by Torvald Adala, editor of the agrarian newspaper Nationen. He was in turn influenced by Pritz. The appointment came as a surprise to many in the Parliament of Norway. Quisling's first action in the post was to deal with the aftermath of the Battle of Menstad, an extremely bitter labor dispute, by sending in troops. After narrowly avoiding criticism by the left wing over his handling of the dispute and the revelation of his earlier militia plans, Quisling turned his attention to perceived threat posed by communists. He created a list of revolutionary trade union opposition leadership who had been the alleged agitators of Menstad. A number of them were eventually charged with subversion and violence against the police. Quisling policies also resulted in the establishment of a permanent militia called the Leidang, which, unlike the body he had previously planned, was to be the counter-revolutionary. Despite the ready availability of junior officers in the reserve following defense cuts, only 7 units were established in 1934, and funding restrictions meant that the enterprise included less than 1,000 men before it faded away. Sometime during the period of 1930 to 1933, Quisling's first wife, Asja, received notice of the annulment of her marriage to him. Over the course of 1932 and into 1933, Pritz's influence over the Nordisk Weekend and lawyer Johan Bernhard Ojot assumed the leadership role. Ojot was keen to work with Quisling because of his newfound popularity, and they devised a new program of the right-wing policies, including prescription of revolutionary parties, including those funded by foreign bodies such as Comintern, the suspension of the voting rights for the people in receipt of social welfare, agricultural debt relief, and an audit of public finances. In 1932, during the Kuhlman affair, Quisling turned on the Prime Minister for questioning his hardline stance over the pacifist agitator Captain Olaf Kuhlman. In a memorandum laying out his proposals for economic and social reform distributed to the entire cabinet, Quisling called the Prime Minister to stand down. As the government began to collapse, Quisling's personal popularity reached new heights. He was referred to as the man of the year, and there were expectations of the forthcoming electoral success. After the underwhelming election results, Quisling attitude negotiation and compromise hardened. A final attempt to form a coalition of the right in March 1934 came to nothing, and from late 1933, Quisling's National Assembly began to carve out its own form of national socialism. No leader in parliament, however, the party struggled to introduce the constitutional reform bill needed to achieve its lofty ambitions. When Quisling tried to introduce the bill directly, it was swiftly rejected, and the party went into decline. In the summer of 1935, headlines quoted Quisling telling opponents that the heads would roll as soon as he achieved power. The threat irreparably damaged the image of his party, and over the following few months, several high-ranking members resigned, including Kai Fejel and Quisling's brother Jørgen. In 1939, Quisling turned his attention towards Norway's preparation for anticipated European war, which he believed involved a drastic increase in the country's defense spending to guarantee its neutrality. Meanwhile, Quisling presented lectures entitled The Jewish Problem in Norway and supported Adolf Hitler in what appeared to be the growing future conflict. Despite condemning Kristallnacht, he sent the German leader a 50th birthday greeting, thanking him for saving Europe from the Bolshevism and Jewish domination. Quisling also contended that should an Anglo-Russian alliance make a neutrality impossible, Norway would have to go with Germany. Invited to the country in the summer of 1939, he began a tour of a number of German and Danish cities. He was received particularly well in Germany, which promised funds to boost National Assembly's standing in Norway and help spread the pro-Nazi sentiment. When war broke out on 1st September 1939, Quisling felt vindicated by both the event and the immediate superiority displayed by the German army. He remained utterly confident that despite its size, his party would soon become the center of political attention. In the early hours of 9th April 1940, Germany invaded Norway by air and sea as Operation Weserbank or Operation Wasser exercise intended to capture King Haakon the Seventh and the government of Prime Minister Johan Navaslund. However, alert at the possibility of invasion, conservative president of the parliament C.J. Ambro arranged for their evacuation to Amma in the east of the country. The Bulcher, a German cruiser which carried most of the personnel intended to take over Norway's administration, was sunk by cannon fire and torpedoes from Osborg Fortress in Ostjord. The Germans had expected the government to surrender and have its replacement ready. Neither happened, although the invasion itself continued. After hours of discussion, Quisling and his German counterpart decided that an immediate coup was necessary, though this was not the preferred option of either Germany's ambassador, Kurt Brauer of the German Foreign Ministry. Once the king had declared the German commission unlawful, it became clear that he would never be won over. An impatient Hitler appointed a German, Joseph Taboven, as the new Norwegian or governor general on 24th April, reporting daily to him. Despite Hitler's assurances, Taboven wanted to make sure that there would be no room in the government for national assembly nor its leader Quisling, with whom he did not get along. Taboven eventually accepted a certain national assembly presence in the government during June, but remained unconvinced about Quisling. As a result, on 25th June, Taboven forced Quisling to step down as the leader of the National Assembly and take a temporary leave of absence in Germany. Quisling remained there until 28th August, while Rosenberg and Admiral Erich Raeder, whom he had met on earlier visit to Berlin, negotiated on his behalf. In the end, Quisling returned in triumph, having won Hitler over in a meeting on 16th August. The Reichskommissar would now have to accommodate Quisling as leader of the government, then allow him to rebuild the National Assembly and bring more of his men into the cabinet. Taboven compiled and addressed the Norwegian people in a radio broadcast in which he asserted that National Assembly will be the only political party allowed. His new position gave Quisling a security of tenure he had previously enjoyed, although Osttima remained outside his control. A month later, in February 1942, Quisling made his first visit to Berlin. It was a productive trip in which all key issues of Norwegian independence were discussed, but Joseph Goebbels in particular remained unconvinced of Quisling's credentials, noting that it was unlikely he would ever make a great statesman. The civil leadership of the resistance, represented by lawyer Sven Azen, demanded Quisling be treated like any other murder suspect, and on 9th May 1945, Quisling and his ministers turned themselves into police. Quisling was transferred to cell 12 of Molagata 19, the main police station in Oslo. The cell was equipped with a tiny table, a basin, and a hole in the wall for the toilet bucket. The trial opened on 20th August 1945. Quisling defense rested on downplaying his unity with Germany, and stressing that he had fought for total independence, something that seemed completely contrary to the recollections of many Norwegians. From that point on, wrote biographer Dahl, Quisling had to tread a fine line between truth and falsehood, and emerged from it an elusive and often pitiful figure. He misrepresented the truth on several occasions, and the truthful majority of his statements won him few advocates in the country at large, where he remained almost universally despised. His wife Maria lived in Oslo until her death in 1980. They had no children. Upon her death, she donated all their Russian antiques to charitable fund that still operated in Oslo as of August 2017. For most of his later political career, Quisling lived in a mansion of Vidkun in Oslo that he called Gimle, after the place in Norse mythology where survivors of the Great Battle of Ragnarok were to live. The house, later renamed Villa Grande in time, became a Holocaust museum. The National Assembly movement was wiped out as a political force in Norway, and Quisling had become one of the most written about Norwegians of all time. The word Quisling became a synonym for traitor. The term was coined by the British newspaper The Times in its lead of 15th April 1940, titled Quislings Everywhere. The noun survived, and for a while during and after World War II, the back-formed verb to quisl was used. One who was quisling was in the act of committing treason. To his supporters, Quisling was regarded as a conscious administrator of highest order, knowledgeable with an eye for detail. He was believed to care deeply about his people and maintained high moral standards throughout. To his opponents, Quisling was unstable and disciplined, abrupt and even threatening. Quite possibly he was both at ease among friends and under pressure when confronted with his political opponents, generally shy and retiring with both. During formal dinners, he often said nothing at all except for the occasional cascade of dramatic rhetoric. Indeed, he did not react well to pressure and would often let slip over dramatic sentiments when put on the spot. Normally open to criticism, he was prone to assuming larger groups were conspiratorial. Quisling was interested in science, Eastern religions, and metaphysics, eventually building up a library that included the works of Spinoza, Kant, Hegel, and Schopenhauer. He kept up with the developments in the realm of quantum physics, but did not keep up with the more current philosophical idea. He blended philosophy and science into what we called universalism or universalism, which was a unified explanation of everything. His original writings, stretched to a acclaimed 2,000 pages, rejected the basic teachings of Orthodox Christianity and established a new theory of life which he called universalism, a term borrowed from a textbook which Jacob Maria de Groot had written on Chinese philosophy. De Groot's book argued that Taoism, Confucianism, and Buddhism were all part of a world religion that de Groot called universalism. Quisling described how his philosophy followed the universal theory of relativity, of which the specific and general theories of relativity are special instances.